to the Word of God.
Can you hear me if I don't take off my mask, or would you prefer me to? Can you hear me? All right. Our two readings today are from Ezekiel chapter 16 and John chapter 5. Our first reading is on page 994 of your Pew Bibles. Ezekiel chapter 16, verses 1 to 14. The word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, confront Jerusalem with her detestable practices and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says to Jerusalem. Your ancestry and birth were in the land of the Canaanites. Your father was an Amorite and your mother a Hittite. On the day you were born, your cord was not cut, nor were you washed with water to make you clean, nor were you rubbed with salt or wrapped in cloths. No one looked on you with pity or had compassion enough to do any of these things for you. Rather, you were thrown out into the open field, for on the day you were born, you were despised. Then I passed by and saw you kicking about in your blood. And as you lay there in your blood, I said to you, live. I made you grow like a plant of the field. You grew up and developed and became the most beautiful of jewels. Your breasts were formed and your hair grew, you who were naked and bare. Later I passed by, and when I looked at you and saw that you were old enough for love, I spread the corner of my garment over you and covered your nakedness. I gave you my solemn oath and entered into a covenant with you, declares the sovereign Lord, and you became mine. I bathed you with water and washed the blood from you and put ointments on you. I clothed you with an embroidered dress and put leather sandals on you. I dressed you in fine linen and covered you with costly garments. I adorned you with jewelry. I put bracelets on your arms and a necklace around your neck. And I put a ring on your nose, earrings on your ears, and a beautiful crown on your head. So you were adorned with gold and silver. Your clothes were of fine linen and costly fabric and embroidered cloth. Your food was fine flour, honey, and olive oil. You became very beautiful and rose to be a queen. And your fame spread among nations on account of your beauty, because the splendor I had given you made your beauty perfect, declares the sovereign Lord. Our second reading is from the Gospel of John, chapter 5, and in your Pew Bibles, that is on page 119. John 5, verses 1 to 15. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up. pick up your mat and walk. At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath, and so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. Dear Lord, through your grace, can you please make us open to you and to your will through this, your holy word. Amen.
Amen. May the Lord bless that reading of His word to our hearts, to our minds, and to our understanding. And may we be edified as the Lord is glorified. Amen. I have thought of a theme or the title for today's message, because the two readings that we are taking together might seem from the opposite sides of the spectrum. But this is the message we are going with today: abundant love, abundant. Abundant love, abundant. That's the problem that you English guys are doing. Two different words sounding the same, but you know what it means. Because we are looking at the way that God works. This is what John has said in his Gospel in the 10th chapter, that I have come so that they have life and have it in abundance. And it is this very abundance of love that the world is abandoning. And when I'm saying abandoning, I am not referring to those who have not had the pleasure or the blessing of coming into contact with God or to know about Jesus, but those who have had it in their hands, who have known God, who have experienced it, who may be able to say, even like David, I was glad when they say to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. And suddenly, sometimes not so suddenly, they abandoned this very big gift that they have had. Our reading this morning comes from Ezekiel, who is saying not so beautiful words. He's saying, this is the word of God. Some translations will say, then again, this is the word of God. I got a word from God. Meaning that you need to check chapter 15. You will understand that it is a continuation of a message that is in chapter 15, when God says to Israel, you are as useless as a vine, because a vine, when it's cut, you can't use its wood to make pots and cups and whatever. And even when you burn it, it doesn't burn long enough. It's not strong enough. And here he is saying to them, this is again the message. Now you need to understand, why would God say that we are useless? Why would God put us there? He says, this is what you need to know. What you need to know is your birth was a problem. Right from the beginning, your mother came from the EFF. weerstandsbeweging. You were born in a land where you were not welcome. Your mother didn't want you, your father didn't want you, your place didn't want you, you did not belong anywhere, you were nothing. You were so despised that they let you live in your blood. It says when you were born, nobody washed you. You were not even rubbed with the salt, you know, to just make your skin right, to get you into this world. They left you spitting around in your blood. That's a very horrible picture. And he says to Israel, before you get on your high horse about you being the chosen of God, remember where you come from. So it is a recollection of their history, the history that has the Hittites, that they have the Amorites, and he says you were born in Canaan, and Canaan was not even a land that welcomed you. I read this, the first time I read it, it didn't sit well with me. I read it again, and I was thinking about this. You know how sometimes we joke, not a nice joke, but sometimes we do joke, and say, you know, it's got a face that only a mother can love. Not even your mother wanted you. This is where you begin to understand this is horrible. Nobody wants to be told this. He says, but when I came by, and this is the good news, my friends, when I came by, I saw you kicking around in your blood. Not even your umbilical cord was cut. You were spitting around kicking around in your blood. And I said one word, live. And you lived. And you grew. You became like a wild plant. You were growing. It was glorious. When I came by, I saw that you had grown. You had listened to the word. The word has had an impact on your life. The word has caused you not to die in your blood as was expected, but the word has helped you grow, and you were growing like a wild plant, and you had grown. You were a woman ready to be married. Everything about you were right, just on the right spaces. So, but the problem is, you had still not been washed. You were still naked. You had lived, but you were not even aware of the fact that you need to be clothed until I came back. So we see the abundance of the love of God in that when God does something, he does not do it and go on holiday and forget about you. He comes and even heals the part that you did not know. Perhaps the important part was just to live, but God is not satisfied with us just living. It has to be life in abundance. He says, I came back. And when I came back, you were living, you had grown, but you were still naked. Now this is the thing about God. He said, I clothe you, but the clothing is not merely putting clothes on you. He said, before I clothed you, there was a process that needed to be undergone. And this is the process. I washed you. Because that blood that you were left in has still not been washed until I came. And I washed you. Have you ever seen somebody who has not washed for a little while? Let's say 2 months. You get the picture. So, I washed you, and obviously that was not washing people, let's tell the truth. The Bible probably is explaining it, but it was lost in translation. I scrubbed you. And the skin must have been raw. And I anointed you with oils. I took care of your body. Before I covered your body, I took care, or I brought it up. This is God just throwing things at us. And he says, when I clothed you, I did not choose or pick up any material that was just lying there. I went for the best that could be bought. I went for the fine linens. I went for the purple cloth. I went for the best. This is God giving us in abundance without measurement. And this is what made you special. He said before then, no one was looking at you. All of a sudden, you became interesting. People began to look at you. And so we have this nation that has been been washed, that has been cleansed, that has been specialized, that is wearing the best, that you cannot ignore anymore. We are no longer talking about a face that not even a mother could love, but we see somebody moving in splendor. So often we forget that moving in the Lord is moving in splendor. Now, I'm not going to go into the rest of what happened after that. Then we come to the New Testament. You know the story that we are familiar with, the story of the healing. Now, depending on our translations, they are translating this word that was in Aramaic. Some would say it was Bethesda, some would say it was Bethsaida, some would say it was Bethsaida. But what it simply means is that it is a house of mercy. It is a house of mercy. Where this man was lying and others were lying there with him, waiting to be healed or hoping to be healed. We don't get the story of the others who were there. We get the story of this man who had been ill for 38 years. The Bible doesn't say he had been there for 38 years. But he had been ill for 38 years. How long he had been there, only God knows. And then Jesus meets this man, or he calls out this man among the many, and he asks him, do you want to be healed? This is where sometimes I have to admit I need prayers. I usually have problems with Jesus because he asks questions when things seem so obvious. You are sick, you can't move, you come to a place where people have come for healing. That should be obvious, shouldn't it? But I finally get to understand that Jesus' question about whether you want healing is a deeper question that I hope in the next few minutes I will be able to get into. When Jesus says to him, do you want to be healed? Let me just break it down for you. When they talk about this place, and that is facing or that is close to the sheep gate of the temple, the archaeologists have dug to try and find this place. They have found the gate, but they could not find this place with the 5 colonnades. So some of them concluded John must have made a mistake, and maybe he was not that familiar with Jerusalem. Unlikely. But later excavations and paleontologists actually found the site. They found the site, and even the ones who had found it before did find it. They just didn't know that they had found it. Because when they searched for a place that had 5 colonnades, expecting the colonnades to be in the shape of a pentagon. But that is not the case. It was one that had 4 colonnades with 1 colonnade in between, dividing the two, causing it to have 2 pools. So what would happen is that there would be water coming from the bigger pool, and when the priests open, I'll come back to the priests right now, open the gate, there would be then the water flowing into the lower one where the people were lying for healing. And this would cause the stirring of the waters. That is why you will find in some translations, the passage that talks about the angel coming to stir the waters is not there, because in the oldest text, it wasn't there. It was a later addition by scribes as they were copying down this, and maybe they wanted to clarify things. They just caused more confusion. Because what was happening is that This is the beautiful thing about being in Grahamstown. In Grahamstown, we go to the stream. We just go to the stream, and now that there is a pipe put in, you see the water flowing. But that water came through a process, from and through the mountains, right? So that is what was happening. The water was flowing from the larger pool through an opening into a smaller pool. But the problem with this place is, and that is why you don't find it in a lot of Hebrew scriptures, in that it is a place that had not been there in the original plan of Jerusalem. It is a place that was built by King Herod. All right, Herod the king. You know that Herod the king built the temple, right? And he built other buildings. And this is one of the things he built it. But get this pool was not built for the glory of God. This was built in honor of the Greco-Roman God. Who is the Greco-Roman God who's associated with medicine? Us? There you go. This was a pool built in honor of the Roman god Asclepius, because Israel or Judah had been Hellenized even before, but it was not a problem for the group, for the Romans, because they had believed in this. That is why you find even today, when you look at our doctors, they have that badge with the snake around the thing, Asclepius. But we have always taken it to be the snake that Moses talked about. That's not a thing. Because he was thought to be the son of Apollos. All right? He was thought to be the son of Apollos, gifted with the gift of healing. But he was so good in what he was doing that he could even raise those who died from the dead. And some people refer to him as a savior. Of course, he was killed by Zeus because he raised people from the dead, which was unnatural. But what was happening is that throughout the Greco-Roman world, you would find these healing centers taking different shapes. You would find them in at least 400 were discovered in the Greco-Roman world. So this man had come for healing in a place set for Asclepius. Now the words of Jesus begin to make sense. Do you want healing? Meaning, what are you doing here? Do you want to be healed? And he is saying to Jesus, yes, I want to be healed, but I don't have anybody taking me into the water. What he's asking for Jesus is that I need your help. But the help that I want from you is for you to put me into the water after the stirring, when the fresh water has come in to that pool. And Jesus acts the way that God would act. Firstly, he says to him, pick up your mat and go. Get out of this place because you do not belong here. Get out of this place because God is not here. So often we run around because we need help, and we move from God, not wanting to see the abundance of his love, because sometimes the abundance of God's love means that because we are filthy, we have to be scraped, and we don't want that pain on our hands. But what we don't know is God is working with us, and God is making us into something beautiful. God is making us into something desirable. So here, but then you have to ask yourself, how does somebody who belongs to God go to a temple like that? There are many theories. But I wonder, is it not because, number one, 38 years is a very long time? 38 years is a very long time. You get tired, you lose hope, you lose focus, and then you decide, I just need for this to be over. Which are the words that the enemy is waiting for. Because if you just need for this to be over, you are not going to get healing. You are getting to get this to be over, but you are not well. And your mat and go. And he picks up his mat and he goes. And it closes. And it was a Sabbath. Now, the authors might be wanting for us to understand the scene that follows of people questioning the Sabbath. Because then they said, why are you walking around with a mat? And I am thinking a person has been sick for 38 years and they did not see him. He had gone into a temple that belongs to a demigod or a false god. They did not see them. And all of a sudden, the Sabbath is important. Our priorities sometimes are screwed. And I wonder, is it a reason this person could not be healed because the people of God were too concerned with the traditions, too concerned with the ways they do things, that they could not bring the person to God? Can we be that church that people can come here in this building, wherever we gather, wherever you meet them, and find a healing, not from you, because you are not the one with the power, but from the God who goes with you, from the God you proclaim. But because the people do not find God in church, because in church we will be concerned with, you're wearing the wrong color mask today. That mask, it's too informal. You should be wearing a Sunday mask that probably goes with your dress or your head. We are concerned that this is not the way we do things in the Presbyterian church. We are concerned with traditions of men so that people end up, when they have come looking for healing, come looking for God, they cannot find God because we have relegated God to the outside. The abundance of the love of God is not present in the house of God. The abundance of this love is not seen in this house, so they have to go out, and then they become victims for some unscrupulous entities out there. Because in the church, this is where we sat down and constructed a proper theory, a proper theology for apartheid. Because we were concerned with the traditions, we were concerned about not losing our identity, forgetting that Christ comes to change that identity, not to make us the ones that are loved by our mothers, but ones that, although they have been told to live, come to realize that living alone is not enough. You need to be washed. You need to be oiled. You need to be clothed. And so people miss, and when they miss this, they run. Now, can I just come back and give my own spin on John's gospel saying, now it was a Sabbath? I like to link this now with this Sabbath, with the healing that this man has received, that he has suffered for 38 years. But now it is a Sabbath. Now he has found his place of healing. Now he is resting from his suffering. Remember, Jesus said the Sabbath was not made for us to observe laws, but the Sabbath is a gift to us from God. And now it was a Sabbath. We come here because we have heard that this is a place of healing. We come because there is healing to be found in God. So that when we lift up this place, we can say, now it is a Sabbath. But what do we do? What do we do as church? What we do as church, we have debates about, is the Sabbath on a Saturday or is the Sabbath on a Sunday? Are we following the lunar calendar? Are we following the solar calendar? This is the thing. Sabbath is not only about a day. Like I've said in the beginning, before COVID gave us a very long Sabbath. Sabbath is about resting. Sabbath is the rest that has been provided by God. Sabbath is the rest that we find in God. And this is why I say this is the abundance of the love of God. Because when it comes to us after suffering, now all of a sudden it is a Sabbath. How many Sabbaths has he gone through? How many times could he not go into the house of God because he was defiled, because he was infirm, he did not belong there. Now it was a Sabbath. And because it's a Sabbath, all of a sudden people see him. And they say to him, "Dude, you're breaking the law. There is a law. It's not time to be carrying bags around." And can I just break it down for you? Because when we think about him carrying a bag, we're thinking of silly posturepedic. We are thinking of a queen-size bed. We are thinking, Edgar is out of fashion, right? Yeah. It's not. Okay, I can tell people are using Edgar. Sorry. We're thinking of Edgar's too. We're thinking about mattresses that are springless, that are foam, that are adjusting to our bodies now. It was a simple thing of a simple mat that was not even heavy to carry. All he had to do when Jesus said, "Pick up your mat and go," was to roll it up, put it. If you have seen, anyone have seen the Muslim prayer mats? Have anybody seen the Muslim prayer mats? They're not very big, right? Beautiful though. Petite. Just think of it a little bigger. Something to sleep on. So it was not really work. But the thing that I want you to look at, when John says now it is a Sabbath, now you are resting. He is chastised for carrying the thing that had been carrying him for 38 years. When Jesus heals you, that thing that you had been depending on, you put on your arm and then you go. For now, it is a Sabbath. But the abundance of God does not only work once and then go. Then there is a whole issue, and then they ask him, "How did you get healed?" And then he says, "There was this dude, I don't know his name." And then they go through the process. But what happens is that Jesus meets him. Now look at the difference. Jesus now meets him in the temple, a place that he could not go to before. He had now come to worship, and Jesus says to him, "Now you are healed." And Jesus says, "Now you are healed," it means now you know how to go to God. And he says to him, "Now that you are healed, don't sin anymore." But he says, "Don't sin anymore." Many a times we have been wondering, because the Bible did not tell us what his sin was. What he said, he's saying to him, "Stop running after useless gods. Stop running after useless traditions. Stop running after things that do not give you life." You were sitting there. You were in that house. You were next to that pool. And the only thing you could see was that you don't have somebody. You now have somebody in the person of Jesus who has not only healed you, but who continues to heal you. You have a God that continues with you. Can we be that church that people can come for healing, and when they leave the space, they can say, "Now it is a Sabbath." Understanding that the Sabbath does not start with the day, but the Sabbath starts with our connection with God. The Sabbath starts with our understanding how God is working and God working in us. And when we have found that, now this is, some commentaries say that when he ran and he told the Pharisees that Jesus is the one who healed him, some commentators say this is a very ungrateful man. And probably the most ungrateful that Jesus has healed. I beg to differ. If you have been healed, if you have met the Sabbath, you tell everybody that it is Jesus who healed me. If there are still those who are worried about the size of is not even easy. You are lying on top of tradition. They are binding you. Come to the man who will set you free from that tradition. You too need Jesus. He is not putting it in the same words as the one in John chapter 9 is saying, do you also want to be one of his disciples? But he's saying, come to the man. Beloved, we have abandoned the abundant love of God. Every day, when we do not stand for the truth, when we are afraid of humans, we are afraid not to belong. We end up belonging and getting into the houses that have the right names, but being moved from God. And then you still sit there, and then you don't get healing. Throughout history, we have had false prophets. We have had false healers, duping people, some idiots even causing people to commit mass suicide. People follow those people because when they come into the house of God, the healing is not there. When they come into the house of God, judgment reigns. When they come into the house of God, we want to see, are you wearing the right dress? Do you have the right skin tone? Is your accent the right one that is needed? Are you able to sit properly? And now you're listening to a minister without a mask. But I am keeping the distance. The abundant love of God takes you into the supper. Shall we go out of this place and celebrate? It says, now is the supper. You may have suffered for 38 years. You may still be worried about things that people have told you will never change, will never be okay. Jesus is here. Same way as he said, you were dying in your blood, and I give it to you as you need it. At that point, clothes did not make sense. At that point, they would not have been at value. But there was an important thing. You would have choked in that blood. You probably would have died of hunger and thirst. The important thing at that point was for you to live. But you can't just live. You have to live in abundance. And I came back because I knew something needed to be done. And there you are. Beautiful. But nobody can see your beauty. They see your grind. You probably stink. And he says, now I come, and with my hands, I deal with your dirt. With my hands, I deal with your stench. With my hands, I heal you, and I make you complete. I wish, as we leave this place, you can change the theme of my message. As we move from abundant love, abundant, perhaps you can change my theme. It says abundant love, discovered, or abundant love, reclaimed, abundant love, recycled, abundant love in me. May the Lord bless us as we go out into the world and love those whom He has loved. Amen.